want to preface this by letting everyone know that even if I didn't have a pre-existing disdain for this book's author, I would still be saying the same exact things that I'm going to say about this novel in this review. With that out of the way, where does one truly even begin with a book this bad? The official author's summary to Stones to Abigail reads as follows. I am Gregory Jackson. I use the name Onision online to represent myself. To be blunt, Stones to Abigail is the first book I've ever written. I haven't even read a book cover to cover in about 14 years aside from Stones to Abigail. The above information might be enough to make most readers run, but it's the truth. Regardless, I wrote Stones to Abigail from the heart. One of the best ways to better understand who I am is to read this book. Learning about James means learning about me. I don't want to sell this book. I want Stones to Abigail to sell itself. So if you're not interested, I hope you find a book you want to read elsewhere soon. Thank you for taking the time to read this. What does any of that have to do with the plot? Absolutely nothing at all! In fact, the actual summary to Stones to Abigail was rewritten multiple times over the first few days of its release, and even then, it still had nothing whatsoever to do with the actual contents of the story. Stones to Abigail is literally just the story of a high school junior named James and his progress at getting into the pants of his love interest Abby. He takes advantage of friends, family, teachers, acquaintances, and even takes advantage of a school shooting in order to finally gain the ultimate prize in his love quest. I honestly wish that this was an exaggeration, but unfortunately, it isn't. This is literally all the story is about, and the reader is tasked with suffering through this nonsense until the end of the story. The first thing that anyone reading this book will realize about our lead character James is that he has an astronomical god complex. From the first page onward, he describes anything and everything with such an utmost arrogance and conceit that it is nearly impossible to want to hear another word out of this kid. Believe it or not, he also happens to harbor what can only be described as a jealous contempt for everyone around him. Be it kids talking amongst themselves in the classroom, minding their own business, he judges them. If they're a jock on the football team walking down the hallway and doesn't bother him at all, he judges this guy too. To our lead character, everyone and anyone is merely a faceless, bland stereotype, and in his mind, they will never be anything lesser or greater than that. This sheer level of narcissism makes it impossible to like this character at all. To make matters even worse, he suffers from what I call Edward Cullen syndrome. This is a term I use to help define a male lead in a story that is near sociopathically obsessed with the love interest for no explained reason. Normal people do not require a girlfriend in order to live a normal life. A healthy relationship is good to have, and it's completely normal for a person to desire love. However, when a character is shown to be totally codependent on that love for their own stability, well, congratulations, you've just created your first mentally unstable character. The relationship that James and Abby develop in this story is not what I would call healthy. Though the author has given Abby about as much personality as a cardboard box, one can gather from how she's described is someone who is going through a patch of depression, and she's described as having to unfortunately deal with some pretty bad issues at home, too. She has an abusive father who at one point in the story is locked up in jail for assaulting her, and he is also one of the many characters in this book that exist only to drive the story forward. Other than being the guy who abuses his kid, Abby's father has no reason to be in the story at all, and it's already messed up enough that, well, he's only there to abuse his daughter because he's an alcoholic. I do not see any other reason, aside from this being a rough draft released as a final product, for Stones to Abigail to have the sheer amount of dead end or just pointless characters as it does. There are people in this book, mentioned by name in the first few chapters, that we never hear about ever again. That's not creative writing. That's just a waste of the reader's time to include people we're not going to see the story of described further later on and thusly don't care about. But let's get back to James and Abby's relationship for a moment. Other than a few glances across the classroom, clunky random dialogue, and some of the most skin-peelingly awkward exposition you'll hope to find outside of bad fan fiction, we never truly see them develop a relationship. Throughout the entire story, they just happen to suit each other's temporary emotional needs due to the events in the story, yet feel they are obsessed with one another for unexplained reasons. Normally, if someone were to pen this in a young adult novel, it'd be best to use it as an example of why most teenage relationships never work. You're developing only temporary feelings, and often neither party gets to know either person well enough to make it really last. There's a huge difference between the kind of dating I did when I was a junior in high school and the serious committed relationship I'm now in as an adult. There's an entire spectrum of emotions here that these two should be going through, so we have a reason to watch their relationship unfold, but that never happens. They just fall for each other, and that's it. Again, this is giving the reader zero reason to have any interest in their relationship, or anything that happens between these two people. Given the author of this book and the nature of what it is that he's written, this causes a few bothersome projections. The author of this book, a person who refers to himself as his YouTuber name, Onision, more often than he does his real name, has had a long history of pursuing completely thoughtless and delusional idealized relationships with women, and he has had no problem airing the dirty laundry of the obvious aftermath of such pursuits online. He's twice tried this with girls fresh out of high school. So to write a book like Stones to Abigail and admit in the description to the book that rather than this just simply being a novel, it is a piece of who he is, this is just disturbing. When you write about what you know. And apparently all this author knows how to do is take advantage of young girls in emotionally unstable home situations just to place them into emotionally unstable relationships with himself until things ultimately crash in flames. There is just too much reality injected into this book, and it's none of the good kind. The saddest part of this is this author/YouTube personality has over and over and over again proven he cannot take criticism. Not only has he tried to vet the reviews on this book by encouraging people who haven't even read it to praise it, he's gone so far to go on his various social media and insult people who did read it or even paid for it and read it, but had the exact same reaction that I have here, that it's trash. Moving along with the story, you'll eventually come across yet another character that only exists to nudge the plot uphill like the little engine that could, Seth. He is the prototypical abusive boyfriend type, and as you might expect a character like this to be, he's an unlikable, jealous turd who reacts like an attack dog to anyone making a move towards Abby, even if it's just as a friendly gesture. He has no provocation in most instances to be this way, and it's hardly explained at all why he's this big of a tool throughout the book. He has hardly any backstory like most of the people in this book and ends up becoming, spoiler alert, the school shooter. I really don't even understand why he needed to be in the plot at all other than to make James seem like an even bigger white knighting tryhard than he already was. Abby's character had it bad enough being the child of an abusive alcoholic father, so why did the author feel the need to make life even worse on her? That's pretty cold. In a sense, it does explain why she's so gullible to codependency, but it goes to show also how big of a dick James really is in this book. He's willing to take advantage of her obvious need for emotional stability after being in an abusive relationship with Seth is taken out of the picture when not only she ends up dumping him, but also gets put into a coma when a character later on beats his head in after the school shooting scene. He also removes Abby's father from the picture when her father is locked up for being caught abusing his daughter and she presses charges. James swoops in for the kill by suggesting she stay with him instead of doing something logical like, I don't know, staying with non-psychotic family and potentially seeking therapy because of these emotional disturbances in her life. There is also something that I haven't mentioned yet about Abby's character. It is revealed during the book that apparently she was gang raped by an unnamed group of boys once and was forced to keep the baby because of her pro-life school counselor whom she confided in about the incident. To make it even worse, Seth found out about her pregnancy and beat her until she miscarried. Pardon my French, but what the fuck? Why does this person need to suffer so much in this story? Seriously, why is this author practically torturing this poor person? When you remember that this is supposedly an expansion on issues from his real life, you just have to scratch your head and ask, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? None of this works, because what started off as a corny teen love novel is now reading to me like a psychological thriller. I almost expect a Denzel Washington-like character to show up at some point and investigate Abby's death because of James murdering her. I don't know at all why Seth gets made to be the school shooter in this book, when at this point it is absolutely clear that out of the two, James has the more severe issues here. He's a complete sociopath. He doesn't care about this happening to Abby whatsoever when she tells him this. He doesn't even react to it at all. What simply happens is, oh, that's really sad. And then he proceeds to give her a hug, and that's it. None, and I mean none, of the characters in this book ever have normal human reactions to anything. Anything that goes on in this story. The school shooting sequence in this book is in such graphic detail that I'm not even going to go into it here. I can't imagine why most of this book is boring, mindless tripe, yet this particular scene, and the car accident caused death scene of Davis's character, has to be in such vivid detail. But they are, and it just comes off as really, really bizarre. This reminds me of the author's tendency to glorify death and violence in near extreme ways in his comedic YouTube videos, as it's almost the exact same tone. After the school shooting scene, all of the characters just seem to move on from this instantly. I mean that. They have hardly any emotional response to watching nearly 52 people die in a senseless act of murder at all. They feel it's their fucking fault for doing nothing, but only for a moment, and then it just becomes an afterthought. Why? I have no idea. People wouldn't react this way in reality. There are still people who witnessed the Columbine incident firsthand who are in therapy to this day. And they even insinuate that a character has been through something like this and could just be A-okay after it happens is just stupid. It is absolutely stupid to think that for even a moment, a character who has been through the levels of emotional trauma that Abby has in this book could be okay after watching almost all of their friends and classmates die is stupid and does not work. Obviously, this author has no idea at all what post-traumatic stress disorder is, how it works, what it does to someone, nor did he even care to look it up at all for research to his book. If you're doing a book that has a scene of a school shooting in it, it would behoove you to look at what kind of after effects that it would have on the characters to endure something like that, especially a group of mentally and emotionally unstable teenagers in a fucking pointless love fucking story. This book features a sex scene as well. Mind you, these characters are about 15 years old, and I really don't know how I feel about a married father near 30 years old writing something like this in the brain-dead manner he's done so. This is not to say that scenes like this haven't been put into widely published novels before. They have. Dean Koontz's book Twilight Eyes, first published in 1987 through Berkeley Publishing, features a pretty descriptive and vivid sex scene between the two lead characters who are around the ages of 17 or 17 and a half. The difference between the two sex scenes and their explicitity is how they are handled and written. Twilight Eyes handles its sex scene well because it actually shows passion between the two characters and aids in showing how deep their relationship has evolved throughout the course of the novel up until that point. It helps the story. In Stones to Abigail, the sex scene is utterly pointless. It makes no sense at all to be here and is written worse than some of the most tacky fan fiction that I've ever read. I don't want to be too graphic, but at the same time I will have to be, because otherwise this cannot be properly described. So here we go. All he does is go down on Abby for about 20 minutes and then fucks her. And apparently he does this over and over and over throughout the day. They take breaks in between for water and to recover, and just become rabbits once again. Why does this need to be in the story? What is this ad? Why does the reader have to care that these two just boned? You get the picture. This doesn't even read like it was written by someone who even knows how to properly have sex with a woman. It's even weirder that this is written as a young adult novel by a guy whose main demographic on YouTube and now readership as a novelist is kids between the ages of 13 and 15. You are putting too many adult themes in a book that is not supposed to have thematic elements like this in it. This is not telling you what you can and can't write. It's telling you be mindful of who the fuck is going to read your book and what you're going to expose them to. As a writer, you have a certain responsibility that if you're going to include things like this in the book, include it for good reason, so that kids don't go out there and emulate the stupid shit that they just read. Obviously, the author does not understand this, or apparently does not care, and decided to keep this in there anyway. And it is a train wreck. An absolute train wreck. Eventually, the entire thing ends on a confusing note, where there's no sense of closure at the end of this book. Throughout all of this psychotic nonsense, Abby and James stay together, and we don't even get to know whether or not it's a happily ever after. The last sentences are just about how James's life is complete now that he still has Abby. If there's a sequel to this book, and it's not included in either the Saw series or is not edited by Eli Roth, I'm gonna be fucking disappointed. All in all, Stones to Abigail sucks. And it sucks hard. This is a book written by a man completely in love with himself that has had multiple mental breakdowns online and apparently offline too for people saying more or less everything that I've said here. This author doesn't seem to even grasp the most basic things about normal human interaction, and it shows. His characters are idealized cardboard cutouts that add nor detract anything from their respective parts in this story, and the plot is just as banal. It moves at a snail's pace, and it is told with the narrational tone of a convicted serial killer. The lead is an unlikable jackass. The love interest is based off an infamous ex-girlfriend of the author and Bella Swan without question. And there is even a character that at first I thought was the only well-written character in the book, as he seemed like just some innocent autistic child, but it turned out that it was a cruel joke about the mentally disadvantaged. Fuck this author for being a stereotyping ass. His book is utter garbage. I would give this 0 stars if I could on Amazon, but we'll just have to settle on 1 out of 5. Trash. Trash. If you liked this video and you want to see more, hit the subscribe button right in front of you here. And, by the way, don't forget, I suffered through this for you. If there's anything else you'd like to see me review, leave a comment in the comment box below. Anyway, I'm some guy on the internet, and so are you. Have a great one.